At my husband's family dinner, his mistress walked in and said loudly, "Your family doesn't want you, just your money." Everyone stayed quiet. I smiled, stood up, and made one phone call. The next morning, my husband and his mistress showed up at my door begging, "Please, you can't do this." But it was too late. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The silence after Chloe's words was the loudest sound I have ever heard. It was not a quiet of shock, but of confirmation. My eyes moved from her smug, defiant face at the foot of our dining table to my husband, Robert. He did not look at me. He studied the rim of his crystal water glass as if it contained the secrets of the universe. I looked at his sister, Margaret, who had just the week prior wept over the phone about her son's tuition, a tuition I had paid. She found a sudden, deep interest in the pattern of the linen tablecloth. His mother, Agnes, the matriarch who had never once approved of me, allowed a small, tight smile to touch her lips before composing her features into a mask of detached observation. "Your family doesn't want you, just your money." Chloe's declaration hung in the air, oily and final. For 30 years, I had constructed a performance: the gracious heiress, the supportive wife, the quiet benefactor. I had furnished this life with my inheritance, padded its walls with my securities, polished its windows with my dividends. I had mistaken their comfort with my provision for acceptance. In that protracted silence, the curtain fell. The audience had stopped pretending to enjoy the show. I felt a coldness settle in my chest, a clear, sharp ice that pushed back against the heat of humiliation threatening my face. I looked at my own hands, resting on the table. The emerald-cut diamond on my left hand, a gift for our 25th anniversary, bought with an account I funded. It glittered under the chandelier's cold light. A beautiful lie. Robert finally cleared his throat. "Chloe, this is neither the time nor the place." His voice was not angry at her cruelty, but annoyed at her timing. It was the tone one uses for a server who has brought the wrong wine. "It's exactly the time and place," Chloe shot back, emboldened by the family's lack of defense for me. She was a junior associate at the firm my capital had stabilized, a fact she either did not know or chose to ignore. She saw a powerful man, not the conduit he was. "They all take from you, Robert. They always have. And she gestured at me with her chin, she just signs the checks and expects gratitude." I watched him. I waited for him to correct her, to say, "This is my wife. You will show respect." To say, "Her generosity is not a topic for discussion." He said nothing. He gave a slight, weary shrug, a man burdened by the avarice of those around him, implicitly including me in that number. The message was unmistakable. Her offense was in saying the quiet part out loud. Agnes spoke then, her voice like dry parchment. "This is a family matter. An outsider should not involve herself." Her censure was for Chloe's breach of etiquette, not for the accusation itself. The distinction was everything. That was the moment. The ice in my chest spread, numbing the pain, clarifying my vision. The faces around my table in the house my money purchased and maintained, were a gallery of stark truth. Margaret's greedy avoidance, Agnes's disdainful complicity, Robert's cowardly resignation, and Chloe, the blunt instrument who had, in her ambition to wound me, handed me a key. I felt my lips curve. It was not a smile of warmth, but of recognition, of a puzzle finally solved. I saw my daughter Ellie's face in my mind, her eyes so full of quiet disappointment in these people, a disappointment I had always soothed and explained away. I had been a fool, but a fool with the deeds, the accounts, the passwords, the legal trusteeships. I placed my napkin on the table beside my untouched plate of seared scallops. The fabric was Belgian linen, monogrammed with an S I had chosen. The movement was slow, deliberate. All eyes snapped to me. "You are correct, Chloe," I said. My voice was calm, lower than I expected. It did not shake. This is a family matter, and you are not family." I looked at Robert. "You should see your guest out. It seems she has misunderstood her welcome." The shock on his face was genuine. He was accustomed to my retreat, my quiet diplomacy, my smoothing over of his family's roughness. This firm, public dismissal was new. It was a line drawn. "Evelyn," he began, a warning in his tone. I stood up. The chair did not scrape. It whispered on the Persian rug, another item from my father's collection. I had the height of the floor, and I looked down at the table, at my life's work of appeasement. "The performance is over," I said, not to any one of them, but to the room, to myself. The words were quiet, but the silence was so absolute they carried. "You will all have to find another stage." I did not look back. I walked out of the dining room, across the marble foyer, and up the curved staircase. My heels made precise, even clicks against the stone, then muffled taps on the runner. I heard the eruption of voices below, Chloe's indignant shriek, Robert's frustrated bark, Margaret's fluttering panic, but it was like noise from a distant radio. It meant nothing. I entered my private study and closed the door. The lock engaged with a solid, satisfying click. Here, the air was different. It smelled of old books, lemon oil, and the faint, clean scent of the orchids on the windowsill. This was the only room in the house I had furnished for myself, with my father's mahogany desk, shelves of literature and history, and artifacts from West Africa that spoke to a heritage this house otherwise ignored. I did not turn on the main light. I walked to the desk in the twilight gloom, the city's glow painting soft shapes through the bay window. I sat in my leather chair. I opened the top drawer. Inside was a simple framed photograph of my father, a man who built an empire with his own hands and mind. Next to it was a secure mobile phone, a line known only to my lawyer, my financial manager, and my daughter. For a long moment, I simply sat. I listened to the absence of their voices. I felt the weight of the ring on my finger. I twisted it once, feeling the band that had circled my life for 3 decades. Then, with a steady hand, I pulled it off. It came away easily. I set it on the blotter, where it sat like a discarded piece of costume jewelry. I picked up the phone. I powered it on. The screen illuminated my face with a cool blue light. The contact list was short. I selected the first number. It was just past 9 in the evening. He answered on the second ring. "Evelyn." His voice, always professional, held a note of readiness. He had been waiting for this call longer than I had known I would make it. "Jonathan," I said, my gaze fixed on the diamond's empty glitter on the desk. "It's time. Initiate the Sterling protocols. All of them, effective immediately." There was no pause, no question. "Understood. I'll begin now. Are you secure?" "I am." I looked around my study at the shadows of my real legacy. Perfectly secure. I ended the call. The silence in the room was no longer accusatory. It was expectant. It was mine. Outside the door, my gilded cage was rattling, its inhabitants confused and angry. But inside, I had just turned the key in a different lock. The first of many. The dinner was over. The real work had begun. The phone went dark in my hand. The silence in the study was no longer empty. It was charged with purpose. I placed the device back in the drawer next to my father's photograph. For a moment, I simply breathed, letting the reality of the initiated process settle into the room. The first move was made. There would be no recalling it. I did not sleep. Sleep was for people whose worlds were still intact. Instead, I turned on the desk lamp, a green-shaded banker's light that had been my father's. Its glow created a pool of clarity on the polished wood. From a lower drawer, I withdrew 3 black filing boxes. They were not locked. Their contents were so mundane, so dry, that no one in this house would ever have thought to look at them. Robert found financial documents tedious. He preferred the summaries prepared by accountants, the bottom lines that granted him permission to spend. The first folder contained the prenuptial agreement. I had insisted on it. My father, a pragmatic man who liked Robert's charm but distrusted its ease, had insisted more. The document was 30 years old, the paper slightly brittle. Its terms were simple. What was mine before the marriage remained mine. Any wealth generated during the marriage would be shared. Robert had signed it with a joking flourish, so confident in his future success that he saw no threat. That confidence had been his first and largest mistake. His success had been a carefully managed performance, a series of positions created for him within my father's company and its investments, roles that provided a title and a salary but generated nothing. All growth came from the legacy I had stewarded. The second folder held the trust documents. The Sterling Family Trust, established by my father, was the engine of our wealth. I was the sole lifetime beneficiary and trustee. Robert was a secondary beneficiary, entitled to distributions at the trustee's discretion. For 30 years, my discretion had been generous, automatic. A monthly distribution funded his lifestyle, another funded his mother's household, and smaller allocations handled his siblings' chronic emergencies. I turned to the most recent quarterly statements. The numbers were objective, clean. They outlined a dependency so complete it was pathological. The third box was not paper. It was a secure hard drive. I connected it to my laptop and entered 2 lengthy passwords. Spreadsheets opened, rows and columns detailing every joint account, every credit card, every property held in both our names. I had maintained this parallel ledger for a decade. Ever since I noticed a pattern of unexplained withdrawals Robert would dismiss as investment opportunities that never materialized. The ledger did not lie. It showed a one-way flow. As the first hints of dawn colored the sky gray outside my window, my secure phone buzzed. It was Jonathan. "The retainer agreements are signed and filed with the court," he said without preamble. His voice was crisp. "The motions to freeze the joint accounts and credit lines have been submitted. Given the circumstances and the prenuptial framework, the judge granted temporary injunctions immediately. They are effective as of 6 a.m. "Thank you, Jonathan." "Alistair is on standby. He has prepared the revocation of financial powers for your signature and the formal notification to the trustees of the various family allowances. Do you wish to proceed?" Alistair McKeown had managed the family investment since my father's retirement. He had never liked Robert. "Yes, send them over. I will sign and return them within the hour." "Consider it done. Evelyn." He paused, a rare break in his professional facade. "This will get loud." "I am counting on it," I replied, and ended the call. The documents arrived via encrypted email. I printed them in the quiet study. The hum of the printer was the only sound. I read each page, every clause. The revocation of power of attorney, the removal of Robert as a signatory on 12 separate banking and investment vehicles, the termination of the automated disbursements to Agnes Sterling, to Margaret, to her son, the instructions to change the locks on the summer house and the apartment in the city, both properties held solely in my name, but which Robert considered his personal domains. I signed each document with my full name, Evelyn Catherine Sterling. The signature was firm, unchanged from the one that had signed our marriage license. I scanned and returned them. My next call was to Alistair. "Jonathan has sent you the signed documents." "I have them," Alistair said. His Scottish accent was more pronounced in the early morning. "The mechanisms are in place. The account freezes will ripple through within minutes of the bank's opening. The credit card companies have been notified. What about the physical assets?" "Proceed, as we discussed. The cars in his name are leased through the company. Cancel the leases. Have them collected. The memberships are next. The country club, the athletic club, the downtown society," Alistair listed, "all paid through the household account, which is now frozen. Their systems will flag his membership automatically by midday." "Good. Evelyn," Alistair said, his tone softer than Jonathan's. "He will call you. He will come to you." "I know." I made one more call. This one was not to a professional. It was to my daughter. Ellie answered on the first ring, her voice thick with sleep but immediately alert. "Mom, is everything okay?" She had heard the news of the dinner, of course. Chloe had made sure of that. "Everything is being set right," I said. The words felt true as I said them. "I have begun the legal and financial separation from your father. It will be severe, and it will be public. I wanted you to hear it from me before the chaos starts." There was a long silence on the line. Then I heard a slow exhale. "Okay. You don't have any questions?" "I have only one question," she said, and I could hear the steel in her voice, the lawyer emerging. "Do you need me to come over?" The simple offer was a balm I had not known I needed. "Not yet, but soon. It will be helpful to have you here." "Then I'll be there. Mom, I'm proud of you." The line went dead. I sat back in my chair. The gray dawn had given way to a pale, watery sunrise. The house below was still quiet. Robert, I knew, would have slept in the guest wing, angry and confused, sure I would cool off and come to my senses. He would be waking soon, expecting his world to function as it always had. I closed the files. I placed the prenuptial agreement on top of the stack. I looked at my father's photograph. His stern expression seemed to hold a hint of approval. He had built this fortress of wealth not for show, but for security, for agency. I had used it to build a cage. Now I was using its very foundations to break the bars. The performance was indeed over. Now began the audit, and I held all the ledgers. The morning was cool and clear. I woke at my usual time, 5:30, without the aid of an alarm. The sleep I had managed was shallow but sufficient. The machinery I had set in motion would not pause for fatigue. I dressed in old, soft trousers and a cotton shirt, clothes I kept for the garden. They were practical, faded from sun and soil. I made a single cup of tea in the kitchen, the house silent around me. Robert, I assumed, was still asleep in the guest suite. He never rose before 8. My phone, my personal one, began to vibrate on the counter as the tea steeped. I glanced at the screen. Margaret. I let it ring until it stopped. A moment later, it began again. Agnes. I placed the phone face down on the granite and took my tea outside. The garden was my sanctuary. It was not the manicured expanse the landscape designers maintained out front, all ornamental hedges and sterile flower beds. This was a walled kitchen garden at the back of the property, my one insistence when we built the house. Here things grew for purpose. Rosemary, thyme, sage, tomato plants staked neatly, lettuce and kale in raised beds. The air smelled of damp earth and green things. I began weeding a bed of carrots, the methodical pull and shake of roots, a calming rhythm. The phone in my pocket buzzed again, a persistent hum against my thigh. I ignored it. I worked for an hour, the sun warming my back. The buzzing came in waves, calls, then a flurry of text message alerts. I did not look. I finished the weeding and moved to pruning the dead leaves from the tomato plants. My hands were dirty, the nails lined with soil. It felt honest. Around 8:30, the back gate clicked open. Maria, our housekeeper, came in, her expression worried. "Senora Evelyn," she said softly, "the phone, it has been ringing. For you, and for Mr. Robert. He is awake now. He is shouting." I snipped a yellowed leaf. "Thank you, Maria. You may take the day off, with full pay. In fact, take the rest of the week. The house will be unsettled." Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. She had worked for me for 15 years. She understood more than she ever said. "Thank you, Senora. Do you need anything before I go?" "No, thank you." She left quietly through the gate. The silence returned, but it was soon broken by the slam of the French doors from the main house. Robert stood on the patio, still in his dressing gown, his hair disheveled. He held his phone in his hand like a weapon. "Evelyn, what in God's name have you done?" I placed my pruning shears in the basket and stood, brushing my hands on my trousers. "I have been gardening, Robert. Did you need something?" My card was declined. He spat the words, his face flushed. At the club. I went to pay for my round with the Andersons and my card was declined. The manager took me aside. He said there was a hold on the account. He was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I see, I said. I picked up my basket and walked toward the tool shed. He followed me, his steps sharp on the gravel path. That's all you have to say? I see? Fix it. Call the bank right now. I hung the basket on its hook inside the shed. I cannot. What do you mean, you cannot? It's a joint account. It was a joint account, I corrected him, turning to face him. As of 6 o'clock this morning, it is frozen, pending the formal dissolution of our financial ties. Your cards are linked to that account. They will not work. His confusion was absolute. It morphed quickly into a dawning, panicky anger. You can't do that. You can't just cut me off. The legal documents I signed last night and the judge who approved them this morning suggest otherwise. I walked past him, back toward the house. I needed to wash my hands. He grabbed my arm. His grip was tight. Evelyn, stop this. This is insane. Over a stupid scene last night? Over Chloe? She's nobody. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. My gaze was steady. He released me. It is not about Chloe, I said, my voice level. She was merely the spotlight. The play was already written. You and your family have been performing it for 30 years. I have simply decided to close the theater. My mother called, he said, his tone shifting to incredulous accusation. Her monthly deposit didn't go through. She's frantic. Margaret's son's tuition bounced. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I have a very clear idea. I reached the patio faucet and turned it on, rinsing the soil from my hands. The water was cold. I am stopping the automatic subsidization of your family's lives. They are adults. They can manage their own finances. With what? He shouted. You've taken everything. I have taken nothing that was not already mine, I said, drying my hands on a clean rag. You have simply lost your access to it. There is a difference. My personal phone, left on the patio table, lit up again. Agnes, then Margaret. Then a number I recognized as Robert's brother, Stephen, who I had not heard from in 2 years except at Christmas. The screen flashed like a distress beacon. Robert stared at the phone, then at me. The reality was beginning to penetrate, not as an emotional betrayal, but as a logistical catastrophe. His lifestyle, his identity, his family's stability, all of it was wired into a system I had just unplugged. What am I supposed to do? The question was quieter, almost plaintive. That, I said, is no longer my concern. I suggest you speak with Chloe. She seemed to have strong opinions on financial independence. I walked into the house, leaving him standing on the patio. I went upstairs to my study. The secure phone showed 2 messages. One from Jonathan. All bank notifications confirmed. Credit card companies have been served. One from Alistair. Club membership suspended. Leases terminated. Collection agents en route to vehicles. I sat at my desk. The main house phone began to ring downstairs. It rang and rang. Robert would eventually answer it. He would have to listen to the panic, the demands, the confusion. He would have to explain what he likely did not yet fully understand himself, that the Bank of Evelyn was permanently closed. From my window, I could see a corner of the garden, the neat rows of vegetables, the orderly herbs. It was a small, productive, manageable world. I had built it myself. Everything else, the echoing mansion, the expensive cars, the memberships, the grasping relatives, had been an annex I was no longer willing to maintain. The phone on my desk, the real one, buzzed again. This time, I looked. It was a text from Ellie. All quiet on the Western Front? I typed a reply. The first shots have been fired. The border is closed. Her response came quickly. Hold the line. Reinforcements en route tomorrow. I put the phone down. The chaos was beginning. But here, in this room, with the ledger of my own making, it was still quiet. It was still mine. The weeding, it seemed, had only just begun. The silence in my study was broken by the distant chime of the doorbell. It was mid-morning of the following day. I was not expecting anyone. Ellie was due in the afternoon. I had a scheduled video conference with my foundations board in 20 minutes. I rose and went to the window that overlooked the circular driveway. Robert's silver sports car, the one with the lease now terminated, was parked at an awkward angle. Next to it was a modest sedan I did not recognize. Two figures stood at my front door. Robert, in the same rumpled clothes from the day before, his face drawn, and Chloe. She looked different outside the context of my dining room, smaller. Her confident posture was gone, replaced by a tense hunch. She was clutching a large handbag to her chest like a shield. The doorbell rang again, a long, insistent press. I considered not answering. I had no obligation to, but I wanted to see it. I needed to witness the direct consequence. I left the study and walked downstairs, my steps measured. I did not hurry. I opened the heavy oak door. The morning light was bright behind them, casting their faces in shadow. I remained in the cool dimness of the foyer, a step above them on the threshold. The shift in elevation was not lost on me. "Evelyn," Robert began, his voice rough, "we need to talk." Chloe's eyes darted past me into the house, then back to my face. She looked pale. "Mrs. Sterling." I did not acknowledge her. I looked at Robert. "You have 30 seconds. I have a meeting." He flinched at my tone. It held no anger, only the chill of a busy administrator. 30 seconds? Evelyn, be reasonable. My car was towed this morning from the club. Towed. They said the lease was canceled. I had to call a cab to get home, to get here. "That is correct," I said. "The lease was through a corporate entity I control. I have ended it." "You can't do that. It's my car." "It was a car you were allowed to use," I clarified. "That allowance has been revoked," Chloe broke in, her voice sharp with a panic she was trying to mask. "My credit cards are all declined, every single one. The hotel where I've been staying called The Room. They said the corporate card on file was invalid. They want me to settle my bill in cash or vacate immediately." I turned my gaze to her. "That is unfortunate, but it is not my concern." "It is your concern," Robert snapped, taking a half step forward. I did not move. He stopped. "You've frozen everything. My accounts, my cards, my mother's income, everything. I can't even get cash from an ATM. What am I supposed to do?" "As I said yesterday, that is no longer my problem to solve." "Evelyn, please," he said, and the word "please" was so foreign on his lips in this context that it sounded strange. "You can't just throw me out like this. After 30 years, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. Whatever you want." What I wanted, I said, my voice still calm, was a husband who saw me as a partner, not a portfolio. What I wanted was a family by marriage that showed a shred of genuine respect. That window has closed. It was closed by your silence at that table. Chloe's composure cracked. "This is because of me? Fine, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. It was wrong. I'll leave. I'll go away. Just fix the cards. Please." I looked at her, this woman who had mistaken audacity for power. "You misunderstand. This is not a punishment for your words. They were simply a catalyst. This is the logical conclusion of 30 years of financial and emotional exploitation. You are a symptom, not the cause. Your presence or absence changes nothing." Robert's face contorted. "So that's it? You're just cutting me off with nothing? I'll fight you. I'll get lawyers. I'll take half of everything." A small, cold smile touched my lips. It was not a pleasant expression. "You are welcome to try. The prenuptial agreement you signed is unequivocal. Your name is on very few assets of actual value. Your salary from Sterling Holdings is your only independent income, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, you are no longer an employee of Sterling Holdings." The blood drained from his face. What? The board convened an emergency meeting. Your role as Vice President of Business Development, a role that never generated business but was developed for you, has been eliminated. Your severance will be calculated according to your base salary, which, as you know, was largely symbolic. You will receive that, and only that, in accordance with the law. Nothing more. Chloe made a small, choked sound. She was staring at Robert as if seeing him for the first time. The powerful executive, the charismatic provider, was evaporating before her eyes, leaving a stunned, middle-aged man with no resources. "You can't do this," Robert whispered, but the fight was leaving him, replaced by a dawning horror. "It is already done," I said. I checked my watch. "My terms are simple. You will vacate this house by the end of the week. Your personal effects will be packed and sent to an address you provide. You are not to contact me directly. All communication will go through Jonathan Avery, my attorney. Any attempt to access accounts, properties, or assets held in my name will be treated as fraud and dealt with accordingly." I looked at both of them. "This conversation is over." I began to close the door. Robert's hand shot out to stop it. "Evelyn, you owe me more than this." I met his eyes. The ice in my chest was absolute. "I owe you nothing. You were paid in full for 30 years, in advance. The account is now empty." I closed the door. The solid thud of the bolt engaging was definitive. I stood in the quiet foyer for a moment, listening. I heard nothing. No shouted pleas, no pounding. Just a hollow silence from the other side of the wood. I walked back upstairs to my study. I sat before my computer and activated the video call. The faces of my foundation's board members appeared on the screen, attentive and respectful. "My apologies for the delay," I said, my voice smooth, professional, untroubled. "A minor domestic issue. Shall we begin?" Wordy as I discussed grant allocations for community literacy programs, a part of my mind registered the sound of an engine starting outside, then fading away. They had left. The beggars had been turned from the door. The first direct confrontation was over. I had stated my terms, I had held the line, and I had not felt a thing. The foundation meeting concluded without further incident. The world of philanthropy, with its clear budgets and measurable outcomes, was a welcome contrast to the chaos I had just shut out. An hour later, the doorbell rang again. This time, I looked through the side window to see Ellie's sensible hybrid car in the driveway. A wave of relief, so sharp it was almost painful, passed through me. I opened the door. She stood there with an overnight bag slung over one shoulder and a cardboard tray holding 2 large paper cups. "Reinforcements," she said, her smile tight but genuine. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She walked into the foyer, her eyes doing a quick lawyer's assessment of the space, as if checking for damage. "So, how bad has it been?" "Manageable," I said, leading her toward the kitchen. "Robert and Chloe came this morning." Ellie set the cups on the island. "I brought tea, the strong kind. Tell me." We took the tea to my study. It felt like the only safe room in the house now. She listened without interruption as I relayed the conversation at the door. My terms, Robert's threats, Chloe's panic. When I finished, she took a slow sip. "Good. You didn't waver. The prenup is ironclad. His threat about lawyers is empty. He can't afford a serious firm, not without access to liquid assets. He'll have to find someone who works on contingency, and no one reputable will take that case given the documentation." Her clinical analysis was a balm. His family has been calling. His mother, his sister. "Let them call," Ellie said, her voice cool. "They're insects who just had their rock kicked over. They'll scurry for a while, then they'll have to find another rock. It's not your concern." I looked at my daughter, this fierce, principled woman I had raised. She had her father's coloring, but none of his essence. Her strength was of a different order. "When did you know?" I asked. "That it was this transactional?" She leaned back in her chair, considering. "I think I always felt it. The way they talked to you, the way they asked for things. It was never a request between equals. It was a petition to a benevolent monarch, and they resented the monarch even as they took the gold. She paused. Do you remember my graduation from law school? I nodded. Grandmother Agnes gave me a check. It was a generous check. And she said, make sure you use this to help those less fortunate, dear. Unlike some, we understand the responsibility of wealth. She looked right at you when she said it. I had forgotten that. The memory returned, crisp and cold. The condescension in Agnes's voice, the implication that my family's wealth, earned by my father's labor, was somehow less responsible than the wealth she consumed from it. I had smiled and thanked her for Ellie. I had let it pass. I cashed the check, Ellie continued, and I donated every cent of it to the legal aid clinic where I was working. I never told her, but I wanted you to know. I saw it, even then. The validation settled something deep and unsettled within me. It was not just my perception. The disrespect had been visible, and it had hurt my child. That knowledge transformed the last lingering threads of guilt into something hard and resolute. My personal phone buzzed. Margaret's name appeared again. I showed the screen to Ellie. Answer it, she said. Put it on speaker. Say nothing. Just listen. I did as she suggested. I activated the speaker. Hello, Margaret. Evelyn, finally, have you lost your mind? Her voice was a shrill shriek, tinny through the speaker. My son's tuition bounced. The school is calling me. What am I supposed to tell him? And Mother is beside herself. Her account is empty. You know she relies on that money for her medications, for her comfort. I said nothing. I looked at Ellie. She nodded, her expression impassive. Are you there? Evelyn? You need to fix this immediately. This is cruel. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay this family? By abandoning us in our time of need? Robert told us what you're doing. It's spiteful. It's evil. You'll never be welcome back after this stunt. I can tell you that much. The threat was so absurd, it was almost funny. The idea that I would seek welcome from them after this. We are your family, Evelyn. You can't just cut us off. We have rights. Ellie made a cutting motion across her throat. I reached for the phone. Margaret, I said, my voice calm, you have no rights to my money. The monthly disbursements were a gift. Gifts can be discontinued. You are a grown woman. Your son is a grown man. Your mother is a grown woman with her own pension and Social Security. You will have to manage. Do not contact me again. I ended the call and set the phone down. Ellie let out a long breath. Good. They always reveal themselves when the money stops. It's never about love or family. It's always about the access. The phone buzzed again almost instantly. This time it was a number from the city. I recognized the area code for the firm where Robert had his sinecure. I let it go to voicemail. They're unraveling, I said, more to myself than to her. They were never raveled to begin with, Ellie replied. You were the thread holding a pile of loose scraps together. Now they're just scraps. We sat in silence for a while, finishing our tea. The afternoon sun slanted across the desk, illuminating the dust motes in the air. It was a quiet, ordinary moment. For the first time in days, I was not alone in the quiet. I had an ally, not a paid professional, but my blood, my chosen family. What do you need from me, Mom? Ellie asked, her professional demeanor softening. Right now, I said, just this, your presence. Tomorrow we begin the next phase. I am going to the headquarters. I am going to formally reclaim what is mine. She nodded. Then I'll be right beside you. Not as your lawyer, but as your daughter. Let them see that. The house felt different with her in it. The echoes of the morning's desperate voices seemed fainter, pushed back by the solid reality of shared purpose. The unraveling was theirs. My work was one of reclamation, and I was no longer working alone. The Sterling Holdings headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of a steel and glass tower downtown. I had not visited in over 2 years. Robert handled the face of the business, attending the required functions, while Alistair and the executive team handled the actual work. My driver pulled up to the private underground entrance. Ellie was beside me, a silent, steady presence. We took the private elevator directly to the executive boardroom on the 50th floor. The ride was smooth and silent. I adjusted the cuff of my jacket, a tailored navy suit I hadn't worn in years. It still fit perfectly. "The board is assembled," Alistair said, meeting us as the elevator doors opened. His expression was grave, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "They received the emergency briefing packet last night. They are prepared for discussion." "There will be no discussion," I said, my voice even. "There will be a notification." He nodded. "As you say." The boardroom was all cool modernity. A long slab of polished dark wood, chairs upholstered in charcoal leather, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic, indifferent view of the city. The 12 board members, a mix of long-tenured company loyalists and newer independent directors, were already seated. The seat at the head of the table, traditionally occupied by the chairman of the board, a title Robert had held for a decade, was empty. All conversation ceased as Ellie and I entered. I did not look at their faces. I walked to the head of the table and placed my portfolio on the wood. I remained standing. Ellie took a seat along the side wall, an observer. "Thank you for assembling on short notice," I began. There was no warmth in the statement. It was an acknowledgement of a directive followed. "I am Evelyn Sterling, majority shareholder and primary beneficiary of the Sterling Trust, which holds a 72% controlling interest in this company. You know me, though we have not often met in this context." A man named Gerald Cartwright, the lead independent director, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sterling, we were, of course, saddened to hear of the personal difficulties. We hope for an amicable resolution." "The resolution is what I am here to formalize," I said, cutting off any further platitudes. I opened my portfolio. The board packet contains several documents. The first is a notarized copy of the prenuptial agreement between myself and Robert Sterling, affirming the separate nature of the assets comprising this controlling interest. The second is a medical power of attorney from my father, Charles Walker, naming me as sole successor trustee, executed prior to his death. The third is a series of financial affidavits demonstrating that Robert Sterling's compensation and position within this company were discretionary allocations, not tied to performance or equity. I let the words hang. The room was utterly still. "The fourth document," I continued, "is a resolution, signed by me as controlling shareholder for your vote. It removes Robert Sterling from his position as chairman of the board and terminates his employment as vice president of business development, effective immediately. It further dissolves the Office of the Chairman budgetary line, reallocating those funds to the Research and Development Division. You have the resolution before you." Gerald Cartwright leaned forward. "Mrs. Sterling, this is highly unusual. Robert has been the public face of this company for a decade. An abrupt removal could cause instability, perhaps a leave of absence, while personal matters are settled." "There is no instability in removing a figurehead who contributes nothing," I interrupted, my tone still calm but leaving no room for debate. "The instability was in allowing the perception to exist that he was integral. That ends today. You have the shareholder directive. You will now vote to enact it." Another director, a woman named Linda Pierce, who had been with the company since my father's time, spoke. "Evelyn, we all respected your father deeply. He built this. But Robert is your husband. Is this truly necessary? The personal and the professional—" I met her gaze. "Linda, do you recall the quarterly meeting 2 years ago when the proposal for the new logistics software was on the table? Robert dismissed it as too technical and suggested instead a rebranding of the company golf tournament, a tournament that cost $400,000 and generated no business. The software would have saved $6 million annually. Which proposal did the board approve?" Her face flushed slightly. The tournament had sponsorship potential. It had no potential. It was a vanity project. You approved it because my husband, the chairman, proposed it. That is the professional cost of the personal. That ends today. Now you will vote. I sat down. The silence was heavy. Alistair, from his seat near me, spoke. The resolution has been moved by the controlling shareholder. Do I have a second? After a pause, Linda Pierce said, "Second." "All in favor?" Alistair said. One by one, hands went up around the table. Some quickly, some slowly. Gerald Cartwright was last. He looked at me, then at the resolution on the table before him. He raised his hand. "The motion carries unanimously," Alistair stated. "The resolution is enacted. I will notify HR and legal to begin the termination process and public disclosure." "Thank you," I said. I stood again. "The transition will be managed by Alistair McKeown, who will assume the role of interim chairman. My involvement will be, as it always should have been, as a shareholder concerned with long-term growth, not social pageantry. This meeting is adjourned." I did not wait for their response. I collected my portfolio and walked out of the boardroom. Ellie fell into step beside me. We were silent until the elevator doors closed. "That was—" Ellie began, then shook her head. "You didn't give them an inch." "They weren't entitled to one," I said. The cold focus that had gripped me in the room began to thaw, replaced by a profound fatigue. They had been complicit in the charade. They enjoyed the easy governance of a board led by a man who asked no hard questions. Now they have to work. As the elevator descended, my secure phone buzzed. A text from Alistair. "Termination paperwork served to his office. Security has been instructed to escort him from the building upon his arrival. Press release drafted for your approval." I showed it to Ellie. She nodded. "The point of no return." "It was passed a long time ago," I said. "I just hadn't acknowledged the sign." The car drove us away from the tower. I did not look back. The legal, financial, and professional strands of the life I had funded for Robert Sterling were now severed. The shell of that life remained, but the substance was gone. I had reclaimed the core of my father's legacy. The rest was just property, and property could be sold. The corporate press release was a model of sterile language. "Sterling Holdings announces leadership transition," it read, citing a strategic realignment and thanking Robert Sterling for his years of service. It was picked up by the business wires by mid-afternoon. By the following morning, it had metastasized. I was in my study reviewing the real estate listings for the mansion with an agent who specialized in discreet, high-net-worth sales. My personal tablet lay on the desk beside us. A notification flashed from a society gossip site I never visited, but which Ellie had instructed me to monitor. The headline was less sterile. "Sterling split sinks socialite. Heiress cuts off husband, cans his career." I tapped it open. There was a grainy photo of Robert leaving what looked like a budget hotel downtown, his head down. Another, clearer photo showed Chloe exiting the same building hours later, dragging a wheeled suitcase, her face set in a grimace. The article was a collection of unnamed sources: a close family friend, a club insider, a stunned colleague. It detailed the credit card declinations, the canceled club memberships, the halted allowances. It mentioned the dramatic dinner party scene with a mystery woman whose identity was apparently an open secret. The tone was salacious, but the facts were, in their essence, correct. The gilded facade had cracked, and the world was peering in at the rot. My real estate agent, a composed woman named Vivian, glanced at the tablet. "The interest will be high, for the property and for the narrative. We can use it to drive urgency or wait for it to settle. Your preference?" "Price it correctly and sell it quickly," I said. "I do not care about the narrative." My secure phone rang. Jonathan. "The news is out. Robert's family has been contacted by several outlets. They're giving quotes. Defensive, hostile quotes. I'm monitoring for anything legally actionable." "Let them talk," I said. They are only confirming the story. Throughout the day, Ellie, who had returned to her own home but was on constant standby, sent me screenshots. Margaret had given a tearful interview to a local lifestyle blog, portraying herself as the victim of a heartless power play that was hurting an elderly mother and a promising young student. Agnes had issued a haughty statement through a paid spokesperson decrying the vulgar public airing of private affairs and the betrayal of family duty. The comments beneath the articles were a mix of schadenfreude and sympathy for the abandoned family. The most telling update came not from the news, but from Alistair. He called in the late afternoon. Robert came to the offices today. He was stopped by security at the lobby as instructed. There was a scene. He demanded to be let up. He claimed it was a misunderstanding. When security stood firm, he became agitated. It was witnessed by several staff members leaving for lunch. He left in a taxi. And Chloe? I asked, though I already knew. Resigned from the firm via email this morning. Effective immediately. Human Resources received a call from the hotel where she was staying. She checked out last night. She left no forwarding address. It appears she has severed ties completely. I ended the call. I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity. It was a simple report on the conclusion of a failed experiment. The dependent organism, when its host was removed, was seeking a new one. The secondary host, finding itself suddenly depleted, had been abandoned. It was biological, not emotional. That evening, Ellie came over for dinner. Maria had prepared a simple meal before leaving for the day. We ate in the breakfast nook, not the formal dining room. He tried to call me today, Ellie said, pushing peas around her plate. Robert, I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. He sounded old. He asked if I could talk to you, to reason with you. What did you do with the message? Deleted it, she said. He doesn't get to use me as a conduit. Not anymore. We cleaned the kitchen together, a mundane ritual that felt more meaningful than any of the grand dinners that table had seen. As we wiped down the counters, my personal phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a transcription appeared on the screen. It was Chloe. Her voice was shaky, stripped of all its prior confidence. Mrs. Sterling, I know you probably won't listen to this. I'm leaving the city. I was wrong about everything. I thought I was stepping into something solid. It was all smoke. I just wanted to say that. I'm sorry for my part in it, for what it's worth. I deleted the message. Her regret was for her own miscalculation, not for the pain she had aimed at me. It was irrelevant. The fallout was complete. The financial severance had triggered a social collapse. The news cycles would spin for a few days, then move on to fresher scandal. The family would be left to navigate a world without subsidies, their credit thin, their names a temporary joke. Robert was alone in a rented room, his career gone, his lover fled, his family blaming him for the drought. The house of cards, as I had known it would, had folded in upon itself with the slightest breeze. The silence in the house that night was different. It was no longer the silence of absence or tension. It was the quiet after a storm has passed. The debris was visible, but the air was clear. The path ahead, for the first time in 30 years, was my own to chart. The public record was sealed. My private reclamation was nearly done. The offer on the mansion came in 3 days later. It was 20% below the initial asking price, but it was cash, with a 60-day closing and no contingencies. The buyer was an investment fund looking for trophy properties. Vivian presented it without comment. Accept it, I said. They are lowballing, anticipating distress, she noted. We could counter, hold out for a better offer. The market is strong. The price is adequate. The speed is the value. I want it done. She nodded and made a note. Very well, I'll draw up the acceptance. The proceeds will be wired to the account you specified? Yes. The account was new, in my name only, already receiving the liquidated funds from various joint holdings Jonathan had untangled. With the sale of the old life in motion, I turned to the blueprint of the new. The architect's studio was in a converted warehouse district, all exposed brick and north-facing windows. David Chen was a man in his 40s with a calm demeanor and a portfolio of homes that emphasized light, flow, and connection to their surroundings. He had been recommended by the director of my foundation, who had used him for community center projects. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, as we sat at a large table scattered with sketches and material samples. "The pleasure is mine, Ms. Sterling. Your foundation's work is impressive. I understand you're looking to build a primary residence. Tell me what you need." I opened my own portfolio. Not financial documents this time, but a simple list and a folder of images I had collected over the years, from magazines, travels, memories. "I need a home for one person, with space for occasional guests. My daughter will visit, perhaps one or two friends. It must be secure, but not a fortress. It must be private, but not isolated. 2 bedrooms, 3 at most, a study, a kitchen large enough to cook in, a garden I can tend myself. No formal dining room, no ballroom, no wine cellar." David listened, his eyes scanning my list. "Priorities? Light, efficiency, quality of materials, a sense of peace. I do not want to impress anyone. I want to live in it." He smiled, a genuine expression. "That is the best starting point. Do you have a plot of land?" I slid a surveyor's map across the table. It was 2 acres on the edge of the Botanical Garden Preserve, a lot I had purchased quietly 5 years ago. I had told Robert it was an investment. In truth, it was an instinct, a piece of land that felt like possibility. The soil was good. There were mature trees. David studied the map, the orientation. "This is excellent. Northern exposure here. We can capture passive solar. The trees here provide natural screening. May I ask, the style? You mentioned images." I showed him pictures of clean-lined mid-century homes, courtyards from Morocco, warm wood paneling from Scandinavian cabins, the vibrant colors of textiles from Ghana and Nigeria. "I do not want a single style. I want elements that feel true. I want wood that feels like wood, stone that feels like stone. I want my books and my art to belong on the walls." He began to sketch, quick, confident lines. "An open living space here, facing the garden preserve. The kitchen anchored here. Your study here, with built-in shelves. A master suite on this wing, separate from the guest rooms for privacy. A covered porch that blurs the line between inside and out." His pencil moved, blocking out shapes. "We can use local stone for the fireplace, reclaimed timber for the beams, large windows but strategically placed for privacy and energy efficiency." As he sketched, I felt a sensation I had not felt in years. Anticipation. This was not decoration. This was foundation. This was a structure that would reflect the life I intended to lead, not the one I had been curating. "How involved do you wish to be?" David asked. "Completely. I will want to see every specification. I will approve every material, but I trust your expertise to guide the form." We spent 2 hours discussing flow, sight lines, practicalities. The size was a fraction of the mansion, but the potential felt vast. As we concluded, my phone buzzed. It was Alistair, but I let it go. This time, the business could wait. Later, back at the mansion, now a property under contract, I called Ellie. "I have chosen an architect. We have begun plans." "Tell me," she said. I described the sketch, the land, the feel of it. "It will take a year, perhaps more, to build." "Where will you live in the meantime?" "The apartment in the city, the one that was never his. It is compact, but it has good light. It will be a good place to transition." "And the money?" she asked, her lawyer's mind always practical. "The proceeds from this house, the liquidations. A portion will fund the new build. A larger portion will be moved into the foundation. I am expanding its scope. Education, women's shelters, legal aid for housing discrimination. I want the wealth to do what it was always meant to do, provide agency, not subsidize indolence. There was a long pause on the line. He would be proud, you know, grandfather. The mention of my father did not bring a pang, but a sense of continuity. I am finally understanding what he built. It was not a monument, it was a tool. I walked through the empty rooms of the mansion that evening, the echoing spaces that had hosted so many hollow gatherings. They were just rooms now, shells. The art had been taken down, crated for storage or sale. The furniture would be auctioned. I felt no attachment, only a mild impatience for the closing date to arrive. The blueprints on David's table were more real to me than these plaster walls. They represented a future built by choice, not by default. The old foundation had been cracked, built on the soft ground of obligation and performance. The new one would be poured on bedrock I had tested myself. The work was no longer about reclamation. It was about creation. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to the work. The request came through Jonathan a week later. Robert wanted to meet. He said it was to discuss practicalities, but Jonathan's tone conveyed the unspoken plea beneath the word. I instructed Jonathan to relay that I would meet him once, for 20 minutes, in a public place of my choosing. There would be no discussion of finances, no renegotiation of terms. He could accept those conditions or not. He accepted. I chose a cafe near the city's modern art museum. It was neutral ground, brightly lit, with white walls and the quiet hum of weekday patrons. I arrived first and selected a table near the window, away from the main flow of traffic. I ordered a green tea. I did not look at the door. He was 5 minutes late. I saw his reflection in the window glass before I turned. The man who approached the table was a diminished version of Robert Sterling. His suit was the same one he'd worn for years, but it now seemed to hang on him, as if he had lost weight rapidly. His hair was less carefully styled. He carried the faint, stale scent of stress and cheap laundry detergent. He looked every day of his 62 years. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low. He did not attempt to sit until I gave a slight nod toward the empty chair. "Robert, you have 20 minutes." He flinched at the time limit, but nodded. He clasped his hands on the table. His knuckles were white. "You look well." "I am well. State your business." He took a shaky breath. "I am living in a furnished studio, in a neighborhood you would never have visited. I am using the severance from the company. It will run out in 2 months. I have no prospects. My family, my mother and sister, they blame me. They will not speak to me. They say I drove you to this." I sipped my tea. It was hot, slightly bitter. Their interpretation is convenient for them. It avoids their own responsibility. Is that what this was? A lesson in responsibility? A flicker of his old anger surfaced, but it was weak, dissipated. It was a cessation of exploitation. Nothing more, nothing less. He leaned forward, his eyes desperate. "Evelyn, I know I failed you. I know I took you for granted. I listened to my family's poison about you for years, and I let it in. I was weak. I am so sorry. For all of it. For Chloe. For the silence at that table. For everything." I observed him. The apology was the most direct he had ever offered, but it was born of consequences, not conscience. It was a plea for restoration, not a statement of principle. "I acknowledge your words." "Acknowledge them?" He looked stricken. "Can you not forgive? Can we not find a way forward? Not as husband and wife, I understand that bridge is burned, but as people who shared a life, could there not be some allowance? A modest stipend? Something to let me get back on my feet? I have nothing." "You have your severance. You have your health. You have a law degree, though you have not practiced in 30 years. You have options. They are merely options you find beneath you." "I am 62, he hissed, keeping his voice down with visible effort. "Who will hire me? What firm wants a man my age with my gap in practice and this scandal attached to him? That is the consequence of the choices you made when you were 52 and 42 and 32. You chose the sinecure over the substance. You chose to be a consumer of wealth, not a builder of it. These are the results. Tears welled in his eyes. They were not theatrical. They were the tears of a man who has finally seen the abyss at his feet. So this is it? You leave me to destitution? After 30 years, you discard me with nothing? I have discarded nothing, I said, my voice flat. I have reclaimed what was mine. You are an adult. Your destiny is your own to manage. I am not your keeper. Not anymore. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. The 20 minutes were nearly up. What would you have me do? The question was a whisper. I am not your advisor. But if you seek a suggestion from a stranger, sell the remaining watches and ties. Use the funds to pay for a career counselor. Seek therapy to understand why you traded your autonomy for a gilded leash for 3 decades. Build a life you can fund yourself, however small. The word therapy made him blink, as if it were a concept from another planet. He stared at me, searching for cruelty, for malice, for any emotion he could latch onto. He found only calm finality. You are cold, he said, the last arrow in his quiver. No, I corrected him. I was warm for a very long time. You mistook that warmth for a perpetual summer. It was a season. The season has changed. I checked my watch. I placed a $20 bill under my saucer to cover the tea. I stood. Evelyn, please. It was a last broken sound. Goodbye, Robert. I walked out of the cafe. The sunlight outside was sharp and clear. I did not look back. I walked to my car, which was parked a block away. I did not feel lighter, nor heavier. I felt resolved. The final offer had been made, and it was not an offer of money. It was an offer of the truth, stark and unadorned. He could choose to hear it or not. That, too, was no longer my concern. The meeting was the last thread, snipped clean. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to negotiate. The past was settled. The future, my future, was waiting. I got into the car and drove toward the architect's studio. There were finishes to select. There was a foundation being poured. There was work to do. 6 months to the day after I walked out of that cafe, I stood in the kitchen of my new home. The air smelled of rosemary, roasting chicken, and the earthy scent of rain on dry soil through the open window. The space was compact, everything within reach. Warm oak cabinets, stone countertops, a stove that performed without pretension. I was making a meal for 5. Ellie arrived first, letting herself in through the garden gate. She carried a bottle of wine and a bouquet of sunflowers. "It's raining," she said, shaking droplets from her hair. "The garden will be happy." "It will," I agreed, taking the flowers. I placed them in a simple ceramic vase on the central island. The yellow against the gray stone was vivid. The others came soon after. Marisol, who had run the Foundation's literacy program for 20 years and had never once asked me for a personal favor. Ben, a retired history professor and my neighbor from the city apartment, who shared my taste for quiet jazz and complex board games. And Clara, an artist I had met through a gallery acquisition for the Foundation, a woman whose laughter was as generous as her talent. There was no formal receiving line. Coats were hung on pegs by the door. Drinks were poured without ceremony. We gathered in the main living space, a room lined with my books and a few carefully chosen pieces of art, a vibrant textile from Accra, a small bronze sculpture, a series of watercolors Clara had done of the botanical preserve. "This house suits you, Evelyn," Ben said, looking around with an appraising eye. "It feels considered." "It was," I said. The conversation flowed easily. Marisol talked about a young woman from her program who had just been accepted to college. Clara described a new series she was starting. Ben and Ellie debated a recent court ruling. I listened. adding a comment when it felt right, content to let the voices weave together around me. When the food was ready, we did not move to a separate dining room. We simply cleared space on the large island and pulled up stools. The chicken was surrounded by roasted potatoes and carrots from my own small garden plot. The bread was from a local bakery. The wine was good, but not rare. "This is delicious, Mom," Ellie said, and the warmth in her voice was for the food, for the company, for the ordinary pleasure of the moment. As we ate, the rain pattered steadily against the large windows overlooking the darkened garden. The room was lit by pendant lights above the island and the soft glow from the fireplace. It was warm. It was full. There was no tension in the silence that occasionally fell, only the comfortable quiet of people enjoying a meal. Later, as we drank coffee, Clara nodded toward a framed architectural sketch on the wall near the study door. It was David Chen's initial concept drawing. "That's the soul of the house, right there," she said. "It was a good blueprint," I said. "More than a blueprint," Ben remarked. "It's a declaration of intent." I did not disagree. The house was exactly that. Every choice, from the placement of the windows to the depth of the bookshelves, was an intent realized. It was the opposite of the mansion, which had been a monument to other people's expectations. The evening wound down naturally. Hugs were exchanged at the door, promises to see each other soon made without wait. They drove away into the damp night. Ellie stayed behind to help tidy. We worked side by side, washing and drying the few dishes. "You seem settled," she said, passing me a plate. "I am settled." "No regrets?" I thought for a moment, stacking the dried plate in the cupboard. "I regret the years I spent confusing generosity with permission to be used. I do not regret ending that confusion." She nodded, satisfied. "Jonathan called me today. The final divorce decree arrived at his office. It's purely a formality now. All assets are fully separated. The last signature." "A formality," I echoed. "It was just a piece of paper." The true separation had happened in stages. In my study that first night, at the front door, in the corporate boardroom, in a sunny cafe. After Ellie left, I turned off the main lights. A single lamp remained on in the living area. I sat in my favorite chair, a worn leather armchair that had been in my father's library. The fire had burned down to embers. The only sounds were the soft hiss of the dying fire and the steady rain. My gaze traveled the room. The books, the art, the sketch on the wall, the empty plates on the counter, evidence of a shared meal. This was my table now. Not a polished expanse for performance, but a lived-in surface where real people broke real bread. The wealth in this room was not in the objects, though they were valued. It was in the quiet, in the autonomy, in the peace that filled the space like clear air. The vengeance was complete. It had been exact, legal, and final. But sitting there in the quiet, I understood that the true reward was not his ruin. It was this simple, unburdened solitude, this freedom to choose who crossed the threshold, this right to build a life that required no audience, no approval, and no silent endurance. I had wanted my power back. I had reclaimed it piece by piece. What I found was that the greatest power was not in controlling others, but in having absolute authority over one's own peace. I turned off the last lamp and went to bed. The rain continued its gentle rhythm on the roof, a sound that promised growth, a clean world in the morning. I slept, and I did not dream of yesterday.